In the vast, sun-scorched deserts of modern-day Iraq, buried beneath mounds of earth and the dust of millennia, lie the remnants of a city that once commanded the known world. This was Nineveh, the magnificent and feared capital of the mighty Assyrian Empire. For centuries, its name was spoken only in whispers, a legendary place mentioned in ancient texts and the pages of the Bible. It was a city of immense power and unparalleled grandeur, whose very existence faded into the realm of myth. Its story is one of ambitious kings, brutal conquest, architectural wonders that defied the imagination of the ancient world. It stood as a testament to human achievement, a metropolis that, at its peak, was the largest city on earth. The story of Nineveh is written not just in stone, clay, but in the very landscape that surrounds it. Located on the eastern bank of the great Tigris River, its position was no accident. The river provided life-giving water for its people and their crops, and it served as a vital artery for trade and communication. From this strategic point, the Assyrian kings launched military campaigns that stretched their dominion from the mountains of Iran to the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. They built an empire on foundations of fear and administrative genius, and Nineveh was its beating heart. The sheer scale of Nineveh was intended to overwhelm all who approached it. Its defenses were legendary. A colossal system of fortifications that stretched for miles. A massive inner wall, perhaps 100 feet high, so thick that chariots could race upon its summit, encircled the core of the city. This was then enclosed by an outer rampart and a wide moat fed by the waters of a nearby stream. These were not merely defensive structures. They were a declaration of power, a psychological barrier designed to intimidate enemies and impress visiting dignitaries. To gaze upon the walls of Nineveh was to understand the might of the empire that built them, an empire that believed itself to be eternal. Yet, for all its strength, Nineveh vanished. Its towering walls crumbled, its magnificent palaces were consumed by fire, and its name became a byword for desolation, just as the ancient prophets had foretold. For over 2,500 years, its exact location was lost, its history preserved only in fragmented accounts. How could such a metropolis, the center of a world-spanning empire, disappear so completely from human memory? How did it rise to such spectacular heights, and what led to its sudden catastrophic fall? This is a story of archaeology, a quest to uncover the truth buried beneath the sands of time. The quest to find Nineveh is a journey into two distinct histories that run parallel to one another. One is the history recorded by the Assyrians themselves, inscribed on clay tablets and carved into stone reliefs. This is a story of powerful kings, Sennacherib, Ashurbanipal. They documented their brutal military victories, their grand building projects, and the immense wealth that flowed into their capital. In their records, Nineveh is a glorious, divinely ordained center of civilization, a city without equal. The other history is the one passed down through the Bible. In its pages, Nineveh is portrayed in a very different light. It is described as a great city of wickedness, a symbol of oppression and moral corruption. It is the destination for one of the Old Testament's most reluctant prophets, Jonah. According to the familiar story, Jonah is commanded by God to travel to Nineveh and warn its inhabitants that their city will be overthrown because of their sins. The tale of Jonah and the great fish is a powerful narrative of obedience, repentance, and divine mercy, and it has cemented Nineveh's place in the Western consciousness as a city desperately in need of redemption. These two narratives present a fascinating puzzle. On one hand, we have the Assyrians' own propaganda, showcasing a city of unmatched glory. On the other, we have the biblical account, which paints a picture of a morally bankrupt metropolis on the brink of divine judgment. How do we reconcile these two starkly different portrayals? Can archaeology bridge the gap between the historical record and the prophetic tradition? The rediscovery of Nineveh in the 19th century opened a new chapter in this age-old story, allowing us to examine the physical evidence left behind by this once great civilization, and compare it with the texts that have survived the ages. Join us as we journey back in time through the layers of history and legend. We will explore the rise of the Assyrian Empire and the monumental construction of its final capital. We will walk in the footsteps of archaeologists who, armed with little more than ancient maps and biblical descriptions, unearthed the city's lost palaces and libraries. We will investigate the story of Jonah and its historical context, and we will witness the dramatic fall of a city that once believed it could never be conquered. This is the story of Nineveh, from its mighty walls and powerful kings to its eventual ruin and astonishing rediscovery. The story of Assyria begins not with a mighty empire, but with a modest city-state nested in the heartland of northern Mesopotamia. This region, known as the Fertile Crescent, was a cradle of civilization, where humanity first learned to cultivate land and build cities. The early Assyrians were a Semitic people who settled on the west bank of the Tigris River at a site they called Ashur. This city, named after their chief deity, would become their first capital and their sacred spiritual center. In these early centuries, from around 2500 BC, the people of Ashur were known more for commerce than for conquest. They established a sophisticated network of trading colonies, most notably in Anatolia. Caravans of donkeys laden with textiles and tin would travel hundreds of miles across treacherous terrain to exchange their goods for silver and copper. This long-distance trade brought wealth and new ideas back to Ashur, laying the economic foundations for future ambitions. The transformation of Assyria from a regional kingdom into a terrifying imperial power was driven by one key innovation: a standing professional army, revolutionary for its time. This army was centrally organized, well-equipped, and brutally efficient. It was divided into specialized units, a crucial element of Assyrian success. Mastery of siege warfare. For a city under siege, little hope remained. Iron fueled the Assyrian war machine: iron swords, iron-tipped spears, iron helmets. The sound of an Assyrian army on the march was an instrument of imperial policy designed to conquer and cow. Their most potent weapon, psychological warfare. They cultivated a reputation for unparalleled cruelty. Royal inscriptions and palace reliefs boast of brutal treatment. Mass deportations of entire populations. These were calculated acts of state-sponsored terror. Surrender and you might be spared to pay tribute. Resist and your city would be annihilated, your people slaughtered, and your name erased from history. It was not until the 9th century BC that the empire would be reborn, bigger and more formidable than ever before. The architect of this resurgence was King Ashurnasirpal II. He established a new military capital at Kalhu, the biblical Kala, and adorned his palace with a series of magnificent but terrifying stone reliefs. His famous black obelisk records the tribute he received from numerous vassal rulers, including Jehu, a king of Israel mentioned in the Bible. Under these powerful kings, the Assyrian Empire became the undisputed superpower of its day. Its dominion stretched from the Persian Gulf to the mountains of Anatolia and from western Iran deep into Egypt. As the Assyrian Empire grew in wealth and power, its kings sought a capital city to reflect imperial grandeur. Nineveh was destined to be the empire's showcase. Sennacherib, 705–681 BC, made Nineveh his obsession. He launched an ambitious urban renewal. He was determined to make it a city without rival. He built the palace without a rival. A palace on an unprecedented scale, administrative nerve center. Sennacherib engineered canals and aqueducts. The stone aqueduct at Jerwan, over 25 kilometers. It is considered by many to be the world's oldest aqueduct. He boasted, "I caused a canal to be dug to the meadows of Nineveh. I made those waters flow over it." The system supplied palace gardens and irrigated plains, a testament to the king's power to make the desert bloom. Among the most iconic and powerful images from the palaces of Nineveh are the royal lion hunts. By depicting himself as the master of the lion, the Assyrian king showed he could vanquish chaos. He maintained order in the world. The realism is stunning and brutal. It captures muscular tension and snarling fury in their final moments. After the hunt, reliefs show the king performing a ritual libation. This religious act transformed the physical victory into a spiritual one. The lion hunt was a metaphor for war. The fate of the lion was a warning to all potential enemies of the empire. The last great king of Assyria, Ashurbanipal, represents the culmination of Assyrian power and culture. However, Ashurbanipal was a man of complex and seemingly contradictory character. Alongside the persona of the fearsome warrior, he cultivated the image of a great scholar. Unusually for a monarch of his time, he was literate, boasting that he could read complex cuneiform texts. This passion for knowledge led to Ashurbanipal's most enduring legacy, the creation of a great library at Nineveh. Among its treasures was the most complete surviving version of the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the world's oldest works of literature. Yet this golden age was to be tragically short-lived. Within 2 decades of Ashurbanipal's death, the great city of Nineveh would be consumed by fire and left to ruin. While the Assyrian kings were carving their own history in stone, another narrative about Nineveh was taking shape. This is the biblical story of Jonah. He receives a direct and unambiguous command from God. Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it. Jonah's reaction is immediate disobedience. He flees in the opposite direction. God hurls a great storm upon the sea. God appoints a great fish to swallow the prophet. Inside the great fish, Jonah turns back to God. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. The text describes Nineveh as an exceedingly great city, a 3 days' journey in breadth. He cries out, "Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown." And the people of Nineveh believed God. They proclaim a fast and put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them to the least of them. He rises from his throne, removes his royal robe, covers himself with sackcloth, and sits in ashes. When God saw what they did, God relented of the disaster that he had said he would do to them, and he did not do it. His death around 627 BC created a power vacuum the empire could not withstand. Subject peoples, long oppressed and exploited, waited for any sign of weakness. The most significant threat arose from the south, Babylonia. He joined forces with the Medes, united to destroy the hated Assyrian Empire. The final act would unfold at Nineveh. The hunters had become the hunted. The siege of Nineveh in 612 BC was the final cataclysmic event. They released a flood to weaken the mud brick foundations. Once the walls were breached, the fate of Nineveh was sealed. The great city that had been the jewel of the empire was systematically and violently annihilated. In a strange twist, the fire also preserved the city's greatest treasure. Tens of thousands of clay tablets were baked hard in the inferno. The once proud heart of the Assyrian Empire was now a desolate wasteland, its glory extinguished in a storm of fire and vengeance. Following its violent destruction, the ruins of Nineveh were quickly reclaimed by the forces of nature. The mighty city literally vanished from sight, passing into legend. For over 2.5 millennia, Nineveh existed only as a name in ancient texts. Local tradition preserved a biblical link, despite the forgotten history. Visitors, unaware of the palaces beneath their feet. By the 19th century, Nineveh was a near myth to the West. A lost city, a symbol of imperial hubris. The rediscovery of Nineveh began in the 1840s, driven by a desire to prove the historical accuracy of the Bible. In 1845, Layard began digging. His success was almost immediate and spectacular. In 1847, he finally shifted his main operations to Kuyunjik. He was about to make a discovery that would dwarf all his previous finds. He found Sennacherib's Royal Annals. It famously boasts, As for Hezekiah the Jew, I shut him up in his royal city like a bird in a cage. A few years later, Hormuzd-Rassam located the palace of King Ashurbanipal, and, within its ruined chambers, found the scattered remains of his great library. The rediscovery of Nineveh brought two powerful, parallel histories into direct conversation. The unearthing of Sennacherib's palace provided stunning, independent confirmation of a historical event described in the Old Testament. The very violence depicted with such pride on the palace walls serves to validate the biblical prophet's condemnation of Nineveh's cruelty. Ultimately, we are left with a dual legacy. Nineveh was both a real historical place and a powerful, enduring symbol. Today, the treasures of Nineveh are scattered, allowing millions to come face to face with the power and artistry of ancient Assyria. The ruins of Nineveh remain in modern-day Iraq, a site of immense historical importance that has faced profound challenges. The study of Nineveh is far from over. Modern archaeological techniques offer new ways to explore, promising to reveal more about the lives of ordinary people. The story of Nineveh remains a compelling chapter in the human story, speaking across the ages of the enduring power of history, the importance of memory, and the unending quest to understand our past. Follow for more biblical archaeology stories.